Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bite Size Nutrition Podcast. I'm Jillian, and today we are going to talk about 4 questions you can ask yourself if you feel obsessed with food. And we're at the beginning of January as I'm recording this. And the reason I wanted to talk about this now is because we have this like flurry of people setting goals and wanting to achieve things. And I know there are so many of you out there that are just like, I just want to think about food less. I want it to not be such a big freaking deal in my life. And I've now been coaching for 8 years. And from the very beginning, one of the things that clients would come to me and say most often was like, I feel like I think about food all the time. I feel like I am obsessed with food. And I used to struggle with this too. I used to joke that thinking about lunch while I was eating breakfast was like, I would joke about that and it would be totally true because my whole day was conditioned around what I would be eating, when I would be eating, what food was in front of me. I would think about different ways to fit different things into my diet. And I want to tell you that if that sounds like you right now, this is not like a life sentence. You're not stuck like this. And you deserve to have brain space to think about so many things outside of food. And it is 100% possible for you. I know because I have changed. I now have so much brain space to think about other things. And the clients that I work with also have changed. I have one client who came to me thinking about food constantly, and now she is writing a freaking book. And you will actually hear from her on this podcast in within the next month or so. I'm going to be having her on to talk about her experience because it's so incredible to hear from other people that used to be in the same boat as you, and now you're like, oh my gosh, things can be different. So with that, let's jump into these questions because depending on your answers to these questions, you're going to be able to pinpoint right away what you might want to start doing to help yourself obsess over food less. So let's jump in. The first question I have for you is, am I eating generally balanced meals at regular intervals? And let's talk about what this looks like. So that means, am I eating this is like general, there's a little bit of variation in here, but where like I can't individualize this to you as I'm speaking to you on a podcast. Generally, what this is going to look like is 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks per day. And that is usually going to look like no more than about 2 to 5 hours between meals. And so, for example, if you're like, hey, I don't eat breakfast, I think about breakfast or I think about food all morning. And then once I start eating, then it's like floodgates open and I can't stop eating about food. Then that's a really great indication like, hey, you're not eating meals at regular intervals. Or let's say you tend to eat really low carb throughout the day. And then in the evening, you're like, God, I can't stop thinking about bread. Well, you're not eating generally balanced meals, right? So we want to, and this is kind of one of the baselines that I'll start clients with is, are we eating generally balanced meals? So protein, fat, carb, fiber in most meals at regular intervals. So we want to make sure that we're not getting too hungry because hunger is a big trigger for thinking about food. So if your answer is no, that is a great place for you to start. And if the answer is yes, and you're like, yeah, I'm doing that and I'm still thinking about food all the time, let's move to the next question. The next question, do I give myself permission to eat all foods or do I have restrictions or rules around what or when or how much I can eat? And so what this looks like, so permission to eat all foods is essentially food neutrality. So this essentially means like, I can theoretically have cake whenever I want. I may not choose to have cake whenever I want because, hey, eating cake in the morning, that usually leads to like an energy crash. Or, if I only eat cake for lunch, then I'm only going to be full for like 45 minutes and that's not really useful. So I technically can eat whatever I want whenever I want, but I use different criteria to choose whether I want to eat that food. And this is a practice. I talk about this, I think, in episode 50, I want to say 55 of this podcast, really in detail. But essentially, what I work towards with all of my clients is unconditional permission to eat, where it is neutral whether you choose to eat cake for lunch or for your snack or whenever you want. However, you get to use your internal wisdom based on your preferences, how you want to feel, what satisfies you to choose whether you eat cake. And so it's a really empowering way to look at making your food choices. And so if the answer is no, if you're like, actually, no, I think cake is bad. I don't let myself eat it. It's only a special occasion food. And, enter any food. It could be pizza, chocolate, bread, whatever that is. If the answer is no, I don't give myself permission to eat all foods, then that's where I would encourage you to start exploring or questioning your food rules. How are those food rules serving you or holding you back? Right? Because you might say, well, hey, it keeps me from eating quote unquote bad food. But if it's driving your constant food thoughts, then it doesn't actually sound like it's serving you. It's actually sounding like it's not very functional. And so we need to look at how do we create more food neutrality so that you can make more empowered choices about what you eat instead of just following rules or fears. And if your answer is yes, you're like, yeah, I give myself permission to eat all foods, pretty neutral about food, then I'm going to challenge that. Because in almost every single case that I've worked with clients who think about food all the time over the last 8 years of coaching, almost every single time where food is on someone's mind more than they would like it to be, there is some form of restriction in the background that is driving those food thoughts. And that restriction is often tied to the third question. Third question. Does my self-worth fluctuate depending on how I feel about my appearance or my weight? And I said this was tied to the last question. And I want to talk a little bit about how. And so if you're like, yeah, my self-worth does fluctuate depending on how I feel about how I look or how I feel about my weight each day, let's talk about this. Because when our self-worth is tied to our weight, we have this belief that, well, I will be more worthy of love, more worthy of care, more worthy of attention when I control my weight or control my body, or when I have reached this supposed like perfect weight or perfect body, which requires us to, surprise, surprise, control our eating behavior. And if you're like, okay, well, yeah, I do see my self-worth fluctuating depending on how I feel about my appearance or my weight. And that can be a daily thing, right? That doesn't need to be like over the course of a month. Like you might find daily, if I wake up and I don't like how I look today, I feel shittier about myself as a person. You are not alone. You are part of a huge group of human beings who have gone from teeny tiny like babies and toddlers who, like, if you've ever seen a child, they like look at their hands and they're like, I have hands. And it's their body is like the most incredible thing ever. And we've gone to adults who have had experiences and comments and pressure on us for so long. And that creates this belief of I must look a certain way. And you might wonder, well, okay, is it possible to not restrict what I eat? Is it possible to care about my weight and appearance at the same time? Yeah, absolutely. And this is a conversation I have with coaching clients all of the time. And the shift that needs to happen is that we want to start looking at self-worth as separate from appearance. So you are worthy of love, of care, of attention, regardless of what you look like, regardless of your weight. And I want to also recognize here that I understand that there's weight stigma in our world. There's weight stigma in our medical system. And it is likely that that people may treat you differently based on how you look. However, that does not have to affect your worth as a human, because that is not your problem. That is a problem with like if someone is treating you differently because of your appearance, that is a them issue, not a you issue. So your self-worth is not the problem here. It's their beliefs about bodies and their beliefs about what is acceptable in the world. And I know that fucking sucks. It sucks and it hurts. And it can be achieved through body image and confidence work. So specifically, an example of how I might approach this with a client who has their self-worth and their appearance very fused together. You might identify experiences that you hold yourself back from because of your beliefs about your weight and your body. And then you can take steps towards doing those things and showing yourself that the things that you want to do and the person that you want to be is possible no matter what you look like. You can also do this through learning how to respond to your thoughts and emotions about your appearance or weight with compassion instead of criticism. So for example, if I feel, bad about how I look today, then I can explore, well, what emotion is that? How do I attend to that emotion rather than going to, well, that must mean I need to fix my body. That must mean I need to restrict my food, right? And how that reduces our food thoughts or reduces our obsession with food is when our self-worth isn't tied to what we weigh today or what we look like. We get to see food as more than just calories. We get to see it as connection, as relationships, as joy, as pleasure, and yes, as fuel as well. And it also means that we can eat a cookie or not eat a cookie, and it doesn't have to be this whole like mental like telenovela where we're creating all of these things about what it means about ourselves and our willpower and our worth. Which brings us to the last question. Am I attending to my emotional needs? And you might be like, I don't actually know the answer to that. And so, a few ways that you can tell that you're not attending to your emotional needs. And then I want to talk about what it looks like to attend to your emotional needs. So you might guilt or shame yourself for feeling a certain way. So you might say, like, I shouldn't be upset about XYZ thing. Or you might gaslight yourself. You might say, like, this isn't a big deal, even though you actually do feel like it's a big deal. You might try to convince yourself. You might notice that small inconveniences drive a really strong emotional reaction. And usually that means that we're not attending to previous emotions. That means that often happens when we're suppressing our emotions. And you might also have a fear of being a burden on others. You might feel like I have to be the happy one or I have to be the positive one. And being a human means attending to a wide range of our emotions. So it is totally normal in the span of a day or even like an hour to be sad and then happy and then hopeful and then curious and then have a moment of loneliness. Like the variety of human emotions is so incredibly normal, and being able to embrace our emotions and attend to our emotions looks like awareness of this is how I feel right now, acceptance of, oh, I feel this way and that's fine. It is information about how I view the world. It has to do with expression, so emotional expression and being able to actually articulate either to ourselves, to others, express it through movement, express it through actions. So expressing our emotions is incredibly important. And then being able to manage our emotional responses. And sometimes it isn't the appropriate emotional response to be bursting into tears right now, but that doesn't mean we deny how we feel. That just means we regulate that emotional response, right? And often when we don't attend to our emotional needs, we often end up using default coping mechanisms, which can often be turning to food, emotional eating, binge eating. It may be simply obsessing over food or exercising quite a lot of control over how we eat. That often we turn to controlling food when we don't feel in control of our emotions or our lives. And so instead of allowing ourselves to be like upset or tired or frustrated or lonely, we numb that or distract ourselves from that with food. And like I said, attending to your emotional needs can start with awareness. And sometimes we need to go a little bit deeper than this because often when I work with clients, we uncover a fear of feeling. It's like, well, if I let myself feel this thing, like what will happen? That's often based on like past experiences. Maybe you've been told that you were too hysterical when you were younger. I can understand this because my family used to call me Sandra Bernhardt, which apparently that she was like an actress. I think she was like a silent movie actress who was known for her like emotional acting. I'm not really sure. Anyways, but as I said, when we learn to attend to our emotional needs, part of that is also recognizing emotions are natural, normal. It is part of being a human. And our emotions can give us so much information about how we perceive the world, what we value. Emotions are definitely not something to be ashamed of, but I also understand when we don't have the tools to handle them, then that can often drive us to being like, well, I'm not going to deal with this shit, right? So here's a quick recap of the questions. Am I eating regularly? Excuse me. Am I eating generally balanced meals at regular intervals? Do I give myself permission to eat all foods, or do I have restrictions or rules around food? Does my self-worth fluctuate depending on how I feel about my appearance or my weight? And am I attending to my emotional needs? If the answer is no to any or all of these questions, I want you to consider why. I know I said why very strangely there. What is missing for you to be able to answer a yes to these questions? And this year can be the year that this stuff changes. If you're someone who feels like you cannot stop thinking about food, it is not a life sentence. You're not wired this way. And I also know how much shame there is around this because I felt it too. I remember sitting at tables with my friends and having food like on the table in front of us. And I was like, I just want to pay attention to the conversation. Why can I not stop thinking about like taking a bite of this food? Right. I remember buying a new snack at the store, and I would hardly be able to walk in the door before I ripped open the package. And I am so glad that I had support to work through this. And honestly, if I had gotten over my fear of opening up about this stuff sooner, I probably would have been able to get support much sooner. And I just want to let you know that I am here to help. Supporting women and men, I have some male clients as well, who struggle with what we've talked about today is what I do every single week. I am coaching someone just like you towards being able to say yes to the questions that we talked about today and helping them move closer to being someone who has the mental space to think about so many things other than food. Anyways, we're going to end here. And I want to let you know that you can find details for one-on-one coaching in the show notes. And if you'd like to set up a Zoom chat with me where we can chat about what's coming up for you, your goals this year with your relationship with food in your body, what might need to happen in order for you to resolve that. I can also share how I can help you. These calls, I want to make it clear that I'm not doing this to like sell you on anything. This is an opportunity for us to get to know each other. If you choose to join coaching, fantastic. If you don't, that's totally your choice, and I'm not going to pressure you. I also like to encourage people to remember that if I'm not the right person to help you, I will point you towards someone who is. I want to make sure that you get the support that you need. And I will leave you with that. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating wherever you listen. Go ahead and share this with someone that you think could enjoy it, or share it on social media and make sure to tag me. And I will see you again soon for another episode of the Bite Size Nutrition Podcast.